My name is Mick Brown, and I'm working within the sector, within the community finance sector. I've been working within Wales in the community finance sector for about 20 years or so, primarily through the credit union sector, and I'm now working with CDFIs. And I'm really just going to talk to you about some of the work that we do. And I think actually, although this is sort of just the introductory slide, it probably says it all in many ways. Because what I would like to do is to try and convert you into away from the business as usual model, which is where the default position is always going to where the big capital is, through the banking sector, through the conventional finance sector. And actually looking back into our own communities and realising that we've got most of the resources that we actually need in terms of capital, revenue, income streams, if we start looking for it. And so I want to sort of take us maybe into a place of where we are at the moment, because Rob spoke very eloquently and inspirationally this morning. And it is about this bottom-up approach. And I think we've got a lot of the infrastructure within Wales to start actually disengaging to some degree from the banking sector. And it's interesting, I think yesterday, was it Lloyd's TSB announced that they've now got a £10 billion loss in the sense that that's how much they've got to now compensate the great British public for effectively fraud, for stealing. It's just theft, larceny. That's the amount of money that they've taken out of our communities, effectively to pay into the pockets of shareholders. The bonuses of the banking sector, the city, and to supplement their bloated salaries. So don't get me on that subject. Anyway. I've just listed there, not to sort of big up me in terms of the illustrious organisations that I'm associated with, but really because those are sort of three key organisations I'm with are the core of the community finance sector. We've got a credit union, and I'm not going to talk about credit unions. We should all know about credit unions. You should all be members of your credit unions, and if you're not, leave this door immediately and go outside and hold your head in shame, because there's no excuse for not being in a credit union. There's one or two worried faces there. I'm going to talk about the day job, which is I'm manager of a CDFI, a Community Development Finance Institution. I'm not going to really sort of talk a lot about what that is, etc., and the technicalities of it, but really what we do, because I think the key thing is, for me, I run a finance company. I don't know what you want. It's up to you. Once you know what I do, you to make the connections in your communities and realise that actually we want to be a partner with you. And it's about the lateral thinking, which I think now needs to go on in terms of how we can assist you into achieving the goals that we all share. Thirdly, I'm with a cooperative, an energy cooperative, Robert Owen Renewables. We're an IPS. And again, I think there's getting increasing understanding of the roles of IPSs and the role of equity shares in terms of ownership, in terms of liberating or exploiting the capital that we have in every single household within our communities, and how that can actually be brought together to provide some of the capital that we require in order to build the assets that we need if we're to create a sustainable economy for the future. So those are the three components which I think we've got in the community finance sector already within Wales. So I'm going to start off with just a contention that we cannot deliver real change whilst we rely upon the chains of conventional capital. Who said that? Yeah, it sounds like it. No, it was me, actually. I'm not wanting to sound like a sort of an unreformed Marxist, which I'm not. I mean, not in the sense I'm not reformed. No, I'm not a Marxist. Not that there's anything wrong with being a Marxist, but it's one. one thing he understood, and that is about capital, and it's about the power of capital. And I think that we fail to sort of recognise that. So whilst Rob rightly was pointing to all the wonderful things that we are doing about trying to relocalise the supply chains, be it food, be it transport, be it whatever, I think we tend to we haven't quite got it and noticed that actually we really have to do that if we're to create true, real, sustainable economies within our communities with regards to capital and the sources of capital and the ownership of capital. And the fascinating, fantastic thing is that we actually probably have got enough in most of our communities. It's about trying to sort of, as the title says, generate a default position of we look inwards at ourselves and what the resources that we actually have to hand. And I think, on that sort of very generalised, fairly glib kind of idea that globalisation is bad and localism is good, I don't think we've kind of internalised that yet sufficiently when it comes to finance. I'm aware that we've probably pushed for time. I'm probably going to miss out that one. But certainly it's just really that it's the last point that I want to raise there, which is that we should be building upon what we already have in place. Okay, so I manage a finance company. We're a social lending company. We have a consumer credit licence, and we're regulated by the Office of Fair Trading. We're based in Mid Wales, in Newtown, here in the county of Powys, but we cover the whole of Wales, and we're a small team. There's about 8 of us. We've got some pretty heavy players in there. We've got an accountant, we've got ex-senior tax inspector, we've got a financial modeller, we've got expert in renewable energy. We've managed to get a defector from Finance Wales who saw the light and came to join us. So we've got a good small team, and we're growing. We've been going about 4 years. And what we do is we're allowed to raise investment finance. We can actually bring money in that maybe other organisations can't. And we do that more or less in the form of loans. So local social enterprises or businesses in our communities actually can disinvest from the banks and put money with us. And then we can put them into dedicated funds, and then we can lend that money back out again. So we're starting to, cut the banks out of the loop. We're starting to actually target where we think that money needs to go. And some of those investors, for example, our local council, town council, it had its reserve funds invested in the Bank of Ireland until somebody posed the question, why? What good is it doing in Ireland? And effectively, they made a decision purely on the basis of return. We were offering a better return. We could offer them a higher interest rate anyway. And we said that, okay, if you put your money with us, we'll actually invest it we'll put the money into a fund which is to support local businesses, micro traders, primarily people working on the market stalls in Newtown or in small businesses. We can make small loans. And that is, those traders are the key, they are the backbone of our rural economy. As Rob points out in Totnes, they've understood that. That's where a lot of their focus is now being orientated. So we raise finance, and we can manage funds as well. This year we'll probably have £3 to £4 million in terms of our loan finance. We're doing a lot with domestic energy loans. I'll talk a very little bit about that. Community renewables. Micro-enterprises I've mentioned, and start-up businesses. There are about 70 of us, CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions, in the UK. We're the only one in Wales. So it's a bit of a lonely place out here because there's a lot of doors that had to be knocked on, corridors pounded, but we're getting there, and we're getting our message across. For those of you who know, there's been recently a sort of a major consultation by Dole and Jones Evans on the financial landscape within Wales. and Finance Wales has been more or less declared unfit for purpose, which leaves a massive gap in terms of what the provisioning is. So you've got the private banking sector, one level, you've got credit unions at another level, and we're floating around somewhere in between. So we want to expand that sector, and it's with you that we can help together to grow that important area of financial provisioning. Okay, this is what we do. We've worked with our local authority, POIS, who have got a load of dosh. So we said, give it to us. And what we would do is we'd help them on a carbon reduction programme. So over the past 2-3 years, we've been lending that money out to domestic householders who want to increase the energy efficiency of their houses, their homes, or put in renewable energy installations, solar PV, thermal, biomass, whatever. We're getting a lot of interest now in biomass. Obviously, they're chasing the feed-in tariffs or the RHIs, whatever. But we've probably done about 200 to 300 households on that scheme. That scheme has now moved into North Wales. We're working with the local authority there. That's more on an anti-poverty programme. So we're targeting houses, who are fuel poor, who are spending significant proportions of their income just on keeping themselves warm. And next month we're probably doing about 150 houses next month and the month after in that 2-month period. So over the next year or two, we're probably looking at about 1,000 households which are borrowing small-scale amounts of money below what you can borrow in a bank, which is usually about 5,000 to 7,500. So people are either having to pay for that out of their savings, many people haven't got that, so they're borrowing either on credit cards at probably around 20-26% APR, or on overdrafts, 16%, I don't know, it's a whole range. It depends how lucky you are. We're doing this in partnership with the credit unions, and the credit unions are an incredible network within Wales. They've got massive market intelligence. If one thing that credit unions have got, they understand their communities, how the communities tick, and the underlying sort of socio-economic sort of drivers within their communities. So we use them as a kind of a partner in assessing loans, de-risking money. So all very well for us to borrow money in at the top end, we've got to make sure it comes back at the bottom end. And that's how we that's the model that we're building. What we're doing with these, ZILF stands for zero interest loans. So we've probably put out about 1.5 million at zero interest, subsidised by the local authority. And LILF is low interest loans, they're going out about 6%. So we keep them well under the Green Deal rate, and that's why it's called a greener deal. And this is where I want to sort of quickly bring you in. We've got to do a bit of economics here. And it's looking at the macroeconomic impact that this has. So if you look at the Green Deal, fine, got no problems with Green Deal. It's the financing of it and the fact that actually if you have energy efficiency measures financed through Green Deal Finance Company, essentially you're borrowing money from the City of London. It's money that's actually capital that doesn't belong to us. It's money that you have to pay an interest on, albeit 6-7%, which is pretty low actually for a lot of households. All that interest is going out of your community. So for a household that is borrowing £3,000 to £4,000 on a Green Deal finance package, you're probably paying around £2,000 in interest. And the reason that compounds up is because of what's known as the golden rule. It's because you have to borrow money over a longer period of time than maybe it's necessary for you to borrow. And the longer you borrow, obviously, the higher the amount of ultimate interest that you pay on that loan. What we do is we work with that household to budget and find what they can afford, and then we can schedule it over a much shorter period of time. So not only is it cheaper money, it actually works out much cheaper in the long run. So with our package, it costs about 260 quid, significantly cheaper for the householder. For the householder who's on low income or who's paying a high percent of their disposable income or their total income on fuel, that's a major significant saving. There's something known as the multiplier effect, and once you start looking at where money goes and what happens to it, if you can keep money in a community, it churns, it goes round, particularly in the poorer households, because they go to the corner shop. They use local services much more. And so that gets used in the corner shop. The corner shop owner, they will buy stuff locally as well. And so the money revolves in the local economy. The more you can encourage that, the bigger the impact it will have on local economic regeneration. So on our model, as opposed to a Green Deal model, we reckon on the households that we're targeting represents nearly £4.5 million, which is actually retained in the local economy, because that interest otherwise just goes out and has disappeared once and forever. Okay? There's lots of other reasons why we advocate this model, and that is, obviously we can encourage much more use of local private sector installers, tradespeople, etc., on installation and energy efficiency work. It's starting then to have a conversation with that householder, and they start beginning to get it. They understand, all the other sort of issues about localism. I mean, they know this. Maybe they just, haven't been able to articulate it, or it's often difficult to act on it. And I think what, all of us are trying to do, or what we should see ourselves as doing, is breaking patterns. If you want to try and change the default position, you've got to destroy and break an existing pattern. And that's what's really hard. But we actively have to understand that's what we're trying to do if we're really to achieve change. What we're doing is also building a local market. We've got 1,000 householders maybe on our database in terms of cross-selling and beginning to sort of bring them into, conscripting them into a share issue, for example, where they can engage on, on building more assets in the community starts to be possible. And we're also changing the discourse. Instead of the old public-private partnership, let's have a public third sector partnership. And I think we all need to sort of wake up to the fact that actually, the kind of dynamics are changing radically, and probably the public sector needs us now more than we needed them in the past. So it's about what can we offer in terms of a deal, in terms of helping to provide solutions for the public sector. That's just looking further at the macroeconomic impacts. In Powys, in my county here, 10,000 houses are hard to heat. If we could actually intervene there and green them up, effectively, we would be retaining 70 million in the local economy. So this is, where small amounts of money, once they start multiplying up, having major impacts and changes into how our communities work. Okay, this is another scheme which we've just won quite a significant contract, which is to support micro businesses. We've got a target of setting up 200 new businesses across Wales in the next 12 months. We've got a particular brief to try and support younger people under 30, sort of young entrepreneurs. This is with small amounts of money, up to maybe 25,000, to get their business off the ground. Again, I mean, the alternative for them is usually nothing. If they're lucky, they can go to family. It's very unlikely that they can go to the banks. Banks usually will, the numbers of people who've come to us for start-up business loans and said, I saw my bank, I've been with my bank for 10 years, I thought I'd get a loan from them. And they said, yeah, you can have a loan, but we want to see a 3-year track record first of your business. I mean, there's a catch-22, it's an impossibility there. So we are able to sort of lubricate that generation of new entrepreneurs. As a business, what we can do is we can go out and bring new capital in. So this is central government monies that we can bring into Wales, which we can now sort of start putting into targeted areas in terms of new and young enterprise. This is something else we're involved in, and which I was talking about this morning in our workshop, which is the community hydro scheme in Newtown and Penarth Weir. That's a £750,000 scheme, and for those of you who are in that workshop, we've hit snags on heritage issues and planning. But the point I want to make here is that by being a partner to the public sector, we were able to go and work with them to say we need at least £250,000 to fill the shortfall or underwrite a share issue. Leave us to do the share issue, that's fine, we do that. But we actually need some underwriting monies in terms of loan finance. So we were able to go to the local authority and say, this is an economic regeneration project. This has got huge benefits to you, to that community, to Newtown, if we can find the capital to do that. So effectively, what they've done is provided the equivalent of a 10-year bond to us. We've put it into a dedicated fund, and we can now lend that into that scheme to make sure that any shortfall in the share issue is underwritten with loan finance. And we can make that loan finance affordable because instead of going out to market, we can go to the local authority and get it at an affordable rate. Again, it's utilising, exploiting, identifying the sources of capital that we actually have in our communities and trying to work in ways that you're putting your mind into the shoes of the other, in this sense in this sense the public sector, and particularly the economic regeneration department, to think, what is it they're going to get out of this? What can we sell them? What can we tell them that if they just give us capital on a short-term loan, they will actually get huge benefits. And of course the benefits are quite significant. That will generate about £3 million into the local economy. Finally, I'm just going to mention as well a sort of a theme that sort of runs through us as a social lending company. Is very much to do with energy. We've been fortunate in winning £1 million through the big lottery for a new fund, which is to help get community renewable schemes through a barrier which many of us actually face. And that is, in a sense, there's kind of like three phases to a development in a very simple way. The front end is kind of, usually it's grantable. So Unavro are doing a sort of, a good job there, and there's other grant bodies which help us to get to a certain phase. Once the scheme is de-risked, once the scheme is pretty, it's pretty safe, once the scheme is got through planning, you can bet your bottom dollar, pound, literally, that the banks are going to be interested. So getting more conventional finance in is probably quite easy, or comparatively easy, at that sort of back end of any development. The tricky bit is the middle bit. Who's going to finance the high-risk stage of a development, where you perhaps got to taper off the grant money, and you've got to actually do the real, grunty bit of work, which actually is very high risk. It might be feasibility work which actually shows, sorry, it's not viable. That money is effectively lost. Do you go to your shareholders? Well, some communities can, and through tax incentives, through share issues, you can attract share capital in to finance some of those phases. But we've got this new fund which will be available to communities across Wales, which is to finance that higher risk stage, to try and get more of us through the gate, so that we can speed up some of the community renewable schemes and get them up and running more quickly. And we're doing this through a sort of a process of what we call solidarity finance. It's influenced by a yak banking system in Scandinavia, which is about, not all communities are endowed with natural resources, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to also just not, the localism agenda is fine, but what about the community, down valley or up on the hill or whatever? And it's about supporting each other a little bit more. Some of our schemes are much more viable than others, and it's the ones that are perhaps less viable have it hardest in terms of trying to access affordable or just access the finance they need in order to get their schemes off the ground. So it's about grouping communities together where those who get through the gate, who actually get planning, who can then actually get the income coming in, are sort of cross-subsidising in a way those that are slightly more higher risk, so that collectively we can actually speed up and get a much better and broader mix of community renewables up and running across Wales. I'm not going to talk to that. That's our wiring diagram. If we get Penarth Weir, when we get Penarth Weir hydro scheme off the ground, we're developing the UK's first energy currency. But that's a story for another day.